All right, so what I'm going to talk about is software and the future of medical devices. And I'm not talking 30 years out. I've seen some of those presentations. Everything's going to be robotic. Surgeries are all automatic. This is about what we are seeing directly now coming in. People coming in with proposals. They might not have funding yet, but they want to talk to us. So we're seeing a definite trend of devices. And that's what we're going to talk about here. A little bit about me. I'm a computer engineer. I've been working in the industry for a long time, specifically in medical for about 20 years. Started at cardiac science and moved on. Don't want to spend much time on this, but I'm now president of Promenade Software, and we do software for medical devices. That's what we do, top to bottom. Firmware, cloud, and everything in between. And we've been in business for about 3.5 years. We spun off from BIT Analytical Instruments, so it was a friendly spin-off where we continued on with what we did there and branched out. Okay, so the meat of the presentation here. What we are seeing is everything's getting interconnected, and I think you know this. But it's getting interconnected in ways that you might not be aware of. And if you think about the big devices, you're saying, yes, they're getting connected to networks, and that's all good. But what we're seeing is connectivity to mobile. Mobile is a big part of devices coming out today. And devices are getting smaller, and they're getting more for home use. Or if they're not home use, they're just small for a practitioner rather than a lab. It might be what we see, but I think it's an industry trend. We're getting emerging technologies from startups. Startups are huge now. When I started in the industry many years ago, everything was big companies, right? Everybody was going to join a J&J or Edwards, and they're still, of course, powerhouses, but all the new technologies, all the emerging technologies are coming from startups. And the reason is that mentality has changed to people. Everybody wants to be part of a startup, right? The San Francisco, the Bay Area mentality of making your startup, making it big. So we're seeing a lot of people actually branching out and deciding to make their own companies. And the barrier to entry is also decreased. It's really easy now to prototype your devices. With a little engineering skill, you can get a Raspberry Pi and directions and make something work. And that's really helped people, small companies, individual groups, to make initial devices. Of course, the market's bigger for smaller, cheaper devices. Trying to sell a $3 million device, you're going to have a limited number of places you can sell it. But if you have a $100 device that could go in the home, you've got millions. So that's kind of the trend as well. And technology, of course, technology is getting cheaper and smaller. So as we see these trends, we're seeing that people are going more towards these small, cheap devices for medical. So everybody has a smartphone in the world. Not sure everybody, but just about, right? And everybody's saying, well, why don't I just use my smartphone and use it to connect to a medical device? This thing has a wonderful computer in it. It's got a wonderful screen in it. It's got, of course, state-of-the-art user interface capabilities. And mine's dinging right now, sorry. Why not use it? And it's another thing people are using it for is a conduit to the cloud. So if I'm at home, if I'm in the field, if I'm anywhere, like a remote place where there's no internet, there's no Wi-Fi, I can use this and connect to the cloud via Bluetooth, right? They all have Bluetooth, so all the devices now want Bluetooth, talk to this, get the data up to the cloud. That's a increasing trend. I think about 80% of our business is now including these. Device to this to the cloud. Or device direct to the cloud, but there's certain situations where the Wi-Fi is not available, so go through this. So we're seeing a lot of interfacing to mobile. And these things are wonderful. I mean, they have beautiful interfaces. They have computational power. They have all sorts of, from the software perspective, things available to use. So we're not inventing all the software. We can use it. It's a wonderful advantage. And of course, there's a big overlap of health and fitness and medical. The boundary is getting very soft, right? If it's measuring your blood pressure, is that health and fitness or is that medical? But some things are definitely medical and they're at home. And for instance, diabetes support. We did an iPhone app for diabetes to keep track of when they type 1 diabetes, when they gave themselves their insulin shot. Other possibilities are for glaucoma. If they've got glaucoma, they need to be measuring it often and at certain times of the day. And if you can make a device that can be at home for that, it's wonderful, right? And there's just a whole series of applications that can work at the home very well. Again, using phones, using available technology, and they have to be inexpensive. What we also see is the desire to share information remotely between doctor and patient. So if I have a phone and he has a tablet, my therapist, my doctor, he can send a treatment to my phone and I can run the device from my phone. Likewise, he can get the data of how often and how well the treatment succeeded. That's also a big component, so it's not relying on the patient to say, yeah, I did my treatment 5 times a day. They get the data. Another part of that is with elderly care. So loved ones can keep track of how often their elderly parent or whoever is getting the treatment that they need via their phones. So these are the trends that we're seeing today coming in mostly in proposal form or starting out, but some of them have already gone to market, but it's definitely a big difference from the big instruments of the past. And data collection is huge. Everybody wants to collect data, right? Because it tells people how to market, how to sell. If you've got consumables involved, getting the data up to the cloud tells people they need more consumables. So let's set up automatic sales for them. It's in some cases, our customers have told us it's more important than the device is getting the data, because it is very important for the researchers, for everybody involved. So, what we're seeing too in the software future, software specific, is that because we're going to these more, there's less dependency on hardware. Hardware is becoming more standardized. But software, too, is using a lot of off-the-shelf software. So this is a challenge for FDA and regulatory, is if I'm giving a therapy via my phone, I've got a lot of off-the-shelf software going on here. How does that play? And that's a challenge that I think is going to be like the challenge we've seen in the past, where when off-the-shelf software just started, the FDA was, putting up their hands, no, but then they realized they had to have it, and it's getting more and more and more, and now it's almost getting to the point where it's 90% of what you're actually running is off the shelf. And there's challenges with that, but from my perspective, having software that thousands of people are using and testing is probably better than software that's made custom that our little team is testing. And not to belittle what we do, we put a lot of effort into making quality software. But it's not a bad thing to use the off-the-shelf software either. So it has to be tested as a unit. It has to be tested all together. But it is where everything is going. And it's powerful. It works. We couldn't do what we're doing without it. Okay, there's a downside to it, and that's the security concerns, and we're going to be talking a lot more on that later today. But when you're talking all this connectivity from your device to your phone to the cloud, device to cloud, off-the-shelf software, Linux, iOS, Android, you've also got a lot of security problems, right? So that's the big downside of all of this is the security, and then how to address it, how to approach it. And so that's been the FDA's emphasis for the last, I'd say, year, is making sure these devices actually are secured. And it's a lot of work and a lot of effort has to go into securing them. So, in summary, we have all these devices connecting to phones, the cloud. We have emerging technologies that are using these commercial mobile devices. And, of course, the cybersecurity is huge. So stay tuned after lunch. We're going to have a panel talking specifically on cybersecurity because, of course, it's one thing to have a virus on your computer. It's a whole other thing to have a virus or security concerns on your pacemaker or any other device you have. So that's a big effort. So if any more information, please feel free to contact me. I'll be here all day. We have a booth over on the other side, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Any questions?
Picking up from where you just ended, the amount of work you do, what's the trend? How much of the billable hours are going towards security and validation and all that?
For cybersecurity specific?
Yeah. The FDA is up.
Yeah.
I'll say this again, although I've been told my voice doesn't need a microphone.
Okay.
So, trending off what you just talked about, curious, it sounded really nice from the standpoint of, we're moving into this space where it's off-the-shelf software and we can actually do things without the FDA watching over us and getting in our way and all that. But you just sort of put that little evil gig in the end there that the FDA is requiring this, the security and the validation and all that. So, based on what you're seeing, what percentage of the billable hours, so to speak, goes into that?
Just to back up, I don't think it's evil. I think it's necessary. So I really support that effort that they're putting in there. But yes, it's absolutely a portion now, a significant portion of the projects. It has to be done early. It has to be thought about early, and it's a continuous thing. So if you're making some device and you plan your cybersecurity and you put it in, you're still not done, right? Because after it releases, there's the whole post-market support that has to happen, because as you're using these devices, vulnerabilities pop up in the industry, and you have to be able to address them. And you have to have the capability in the software to monitor them, to address them, and know what's going to affect your device. So if I was to throw out a percentage, it a little bit depends on the complexity of the device, but from what we see, about 20 to 30% on securing them. But that, again, there's a scale. Yeah. Good question. Any others?
Francis, just as this is going and this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, who's handling the work? I mean, I look at it, especially from my own situation of retained search. There's a million people out there with tremendous skill when it comes to computer technology, IT in general. Mm-hmm. Is this an industry that's going to start being created, or a sub-industry within medical device?
Start being created. I mean, I'll say from our perspective, we're doing it. I mean, right? Promenade does it. Anybody who's doing software for medical devices has to have the capability within themselves to be able to meet the trends and the cybersecurity. But it's an interesting question you bring up, because it came up at a FDA roundtable just recently that my associate partner who is dealing with the cybersecurity went to. And initially, this roundtable was only for medical device manufacturers, and he signed up because he goes to many of these. And they said, no, you're a service provider. This is only for manufacturers. And we said, well, wait a minute. Who's doing this work, right? Because there's an estimated 80,000 small device manufacturers out there today. And how many of the large guys? But the mentality at that level is still that medical device manufacturers are J&J or Edwards, the big guys. And of course they are. But all these emerging technologies are coming from smaller guys and smaller companies like ours doing that work. So of course they let us in after we explain the situation, but it's still a mentality that we have to address. And they recognize they have to address it. They're asking us, how do we get small manufacturers part of what we're doing? And we told them, well, invite them to your meetings for one, or let them go. But of course, it's more involved than that. But yes, you will see a lot more people in medical, software engineers in medical, IT people that are cybersecurity experts. But not just that, this whole new technology. Medical, I've been in medical now for 20 years, and we've seen, it used to be embedded engineers, right? And now it's embedded, it's applications, it's mobile, it's cloud. So software for medical devices has changed its face completely. It's now the whole stack of software, but it's regulated. It has different, you're not going to get your normal web dev guy doing it for medical devices. They have to have a training and cognizant of the issues around regulatory and just making, I'll say, quality, the bar of quality has to be higher. It's not just get it out the door like you see in consumer work. It's get it out well. Mm-hmm.
Is there any consolidation going on in this space? Everybody has the same problem. It's not one company, as you said, literally thousands of companies. And then there is also this connection with electronic health records and things like that. So I'm just wondering, everybody's trying to solve the same problem in their own different ways. Would it not probably be better to have some standards or some consolidation going on in this space?
I guess I'm not understanding. Is the question consolidation for... Explain a little bit.
Is there like a Microsoft product out there?
Oh, I see.
I can use Microsoft Excel for everything.
Right, okay, I get the question a little bit more. Yes and no, I would say. Okay, so yes in the fact that off-the-shelf software. Okay, when we're doing software, we're using a lot of software that's been consolidated, like your Excel, but for software development, right? However, it has to be customized. And the thing about it, though, that is different than Excel is it's changing. It's changing every year. The face is changing. And that's hard for everybody. That's hard for us to decide what we should do next year on our devices. We're using this technology, and now there's this great new technology that's open source and off the shelf, and it works really well. So we have to switch. Well, we don't have to, but it makes sense to switch. So there's a tremendous amount of churn, of movement in devices. And I think Dan's telling me it's time to move on because we're late. But yeah, there's a lot of standards, but there's a lot of movement. So I'm not seeing consolidation like you might be expecting. Okay, we'll wrap up. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.